Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 566. My guest this week is an entrepreneur who has rebranded his business and changed domain names. Perry Rosenbloom was on the podcast back in December of 2022 when he was launching a new business called Motion on Motion.io. Well, he ran into a couple of problems with that name. First, he found it was difficult to gain mindshare for the brand because of the generic nature of it and the number of companies that use Motion in their name. Second, he had a trademark issue with another tech company. On today's show, Perry explains how he found a new name for his business, LaunchBay. He also shares some advice for startup founders so they don't repeat his mistakes. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Sav.com and its domain transfer pricing. Transfer.com's to Sav right now for only $9.65. Sav doesn't raise your prices a lot on renewal either. Right now, .com domains renew for just $10.15. Start saving money. Go to sav.com/DNW/transfer. That's sav.com/DNW/transfer. Let's talk through some news in the domain business from the last week before we chat with Perry. First up, Ethos Capital, the private equity owner of top-level domain name company Identity Digital, announced a continuation vehicle for its investment. The deal includes new and existing investors, including TPG, KKR, and CVC, the alphabet soup of private equity companies. The move comes ahead of next year's application phase for new top-level domains. Ethos says the transaction, quote, enables Ethos to support Identity Digital's next stage of growth while offering existing investors the opportunity for liquidity. In other news, the U.S. government has started the process of opening up the .us registry to bid. It's currently managed by GoDaddy Registry, which acquired the contract when it bought Neustar's domain business in 2020. The contract represents a significant opportunity for registry operators. The .us zone currently contains about 2.5 million domains. While the government does not pay the registry operator directly, the operator collects wholesale fees from registrars for each domain registration. Applicants must disclose their proposed wholesale pricing and any plans to offer rebates to registrars. Pricing will be considered in the evaluation, which is one of the reasons the cost of registering and renewing .us domains has remained relatively low. One interesting thing in the RFP is that the operator cannot also act as a registrar for .us domains. I'm not sure how the government will look at its current relationship with GoDaddy, which does offer .us registrations when it considers responses to the RFP. When the government originally contracted with Neustar, there wasn't a conflict because Neustar was only a registry. Cybersecurity company Infoblox released research last week that claimed the majority of traffic to park domains is now forwarding to scams, malware sites, and other bad sites through zero-click advertising. Now, note they aren't talking about the majority of parked domains, just the majority of traffic. But this is a big issue for the domain name industry that will attract unwanted attention. More domains will be monetized via zero-click now that AdSense for domains is shut down. The Supreme Court has declined to hear an appeal involving a cybersquatting dispute for the domain trx.com. This means the domain will remain with the domain investor that owns the domain. The appeal was interesting because the International Trademark Association, or INTA, had asked the court to hear the dispute to settle the conflicting precedent about when a domain is considered registered under the Anti-Cybersquatting Consumer Protection Act. While the Ninth Circuit considers the original date a domain was registered, regardless of when the current registrant obtained the domain, other circuits consider a change of registrant as a new registration, which is similar to how UDRP operates. One other thing to check out on Domain Name Wire from last week, I published a story about Fruits.co, one of the many companies competing in the domain sales lander segment. The company now has 2.6 million domains on its platform. It seems to be attracting a lot of sellers in Europe because it handles VAT taxes for buyers and sellers. Check out that story on December 17th. Just a quick programming note before we move to the interview segment of this podcast. Next week will be the annual predictions episode, where you'll hear from 26 people in the domain business. There are some interesting predictions, so be sure to listen to next week's show. I'll still be writing over the holidays, although I'll be taking a couple of days off. So be sure to check out domainnamewire.com for the latest. Now, let's chat with Perry. My guest this week is Perry Rosenbloom, founder of LaunchBay. Perry, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we chatted back on episode 417. That was in December of 2022. So anyone listening, you can go back and listen to that. And at the time, you were getting ready to launch your new business at motion.io after selling your previous business. So remind me, you had acquired motion.io thinking it'd be good for whatever business you did next, right? Is that right?
Yeah, and that's really funny because it's one of the drawbacks of the name we found over time was that it was quite generic. And yes, so I had acquired that domain name and we launched our business on motion.io about 3 years ago now. And we just recently rebranded away from that name.
Yeah.
Which is why we're on the show chatting today.
We'll definitely talk about that. But you launched this project management platform for client-facing projects, is how you described it back in 2022. But you recently changed the name to LaunchBay. We'll get into that name change, but tell me, what does LaunchBay do?
LaunchBay is a customer onboarding and collaboration platform. So for any businesses that are either doing enterprise, high-value client collaboration and work, or if they're doing customer data collection at scale, what we do is we take that so that the minute a deal is closed, one in a CRM, our software begins onboarding that customer in a branded workspace, collecting all the relevant information that they need, and really helping remove onboarding as a bottleneck to their ability to scale and to grow.
So I guess a typical situation would be maybe like an advertising or marketing agency.
Yeah, so marketing agencies are a major client of ours, as are, enterprise B2B implementation teams. So software implementation teams. And then we also have a lot of like legal and accountants that use our platform, but consultants, marketing agencies, and B2B implementation teams are the biggest users of our platform.
And what sort of traction have you gotten since launching this a few years ago?
Yeah, so, after we launched it a few years ago, we spent a solid I guess it was a year and a half kind of wandering in the woods. It was interesting hearing you describe us as this project management platform for client work. And then we really started finding our traction. I guess it was maybe about 2 years ago or so. And things took off really nicely. We raised a seed round about a year ago. We tripled in revenue over the last calendar year and grown really well. And yeah, it's been a great journey for us so far. And, we're just getting started.
Can you share any details about that seed round or the revenue numbers?
I can share details about the seed round. It's publicly, we raised, it was right about 2.3, 2.4 million, roughly. I think it was a 12 million post or so. So not quite like the AI bubble seed rounds that you're seeing, but it was from really great partners here in the Colorado ecosystem. And that capital has been really instrumental in helping us, pour gasoline on this fire that we've cultivated.
Yeah. So you launched as motion.io. You have for those listening, Perry's a little bit of a domainer, a little bit of a domain investor. Your previous company, you had rebranded it to a name you had bought, I think on NameJet or something like that, something in your portfolio. But you're rebranding here, and you alluded to this earlier, that motion was kind of generic. And kind of the mission of your company has changed slightly, right? How you pitch it since that original project management for client-facing projects. So tell me what's behind this rebrand to LaunchBay.
We got an email in, I guess it was 5 months ago. There's another company out there called UseMotion. And, when we started off, they were a calendar platform that kind of expanded into project management. And they had the trademark on Motion for project management. And what we discovered in our conversations with attorneys in our legal counsel was that, just calling ourselves motion.io, the .io is not a meaningful enough distinguishing factor. And so there was a reasonable likelihood that if we fought it would cost us far more money than we wanted to spend. And we'd still be building on a name that was in a pretty crowded space that we couldn't necessarily build the right kind of brand equity that we would probably want to build, just given how popular the name Motion actually is. And so we talked through things internally, and we made the decision that, hey, we're not going to fight this. We don't think the name Motion really even applies to us anymore. Initially, we're like, oh, you can run client projects faster, but we didn't think that it was really the most applicable name for us at that time, and so and where we wanted to go. And so we began the process of rebranding and looking through hundreds of thousands of names, which was a fun process. And I swear I became a better domainer because of this entire experience, and just looking at things through the lens of a buyer with the legitimate budget and what really mattered to us. So,
it's interesting because there are a lot of companies that use the name Motion. And so as a domain investor, it's like, oh, I want to own a domain with Motion in it. Like Motion.io, one of these companies can buy it. But like I just put this into Google. And of course, the one you referred to is Use Motion. Their actual name is Motion, but they had to go with Use Motion because another company uses Motion.com. And then here's another one, Motion Creative Analytics, that uses MotionApp.com. And then here's, MotionApp.com. Who else is in here? There are lots of companies with it. And that makes it harder to carve it out as your own, let alone this trademark issue. I look at Use Motion's website, and it seems very different for me. But if they have the trademark in the space, that's what lawyers are here to tell you about. So,
right. And that's not to say that Motion.io is a bad name to invest in as a domain investor, right? Like, I mean, before we actually launched with Motion.io, I had an acquisition offer for the name that would have about a 3x return on what I had spent on it. But it's a good domain, not necessarily the right domain to build a business on. It's a great upgrade domain for Use Motion, and who knows where, we still own the asset Motion.io, so we'll see where that takes us. So,
yeah, and they're a big company. They raised $60 million at a $550 million valuation in September, so slightly bigger than yours. So it would definitely be a David and Goliath situation anyway. So,
yeah, it wasn't worth it.
Talk to me about how you went around finding your new name, LaunchBay.
Yeah, so that was exhausting. I will say just a major shout out to Adam. Their marketplace is really fantastic at actually finding names, especially compared to other marketplaces out there like Afternic and GoDaddy. It was really challenging to find a name on GoDaddy. But I mean, we just started searching, just putting in terms. I'd spend time on Adam and Brand Bucket, just looking through lists of names, and we would just come up with names, we being my co-founders and I. And we just built out a spreadsheet of close to, I think it was like 700, 800 names in total. And what was really challenging was, how do we find a name to ensure that we don't go through this process again? And, our budget was, we didn't want to spend more than like $50,000, $60,000 on a name. But we would have if we found a good one. We were just looking at, for me as a domainer, I was looking at single word descriptive names that could really just like encapsulate what we wanted and evoke an image and a feeling. And then it was like, all right, well, if we want that, we're looking at .io again, which is fine.
Because of your budget range, right? Because otherwise you're talking seven figures. Yeah.
Exactly. .io. There were some .ai's, but .ai's are pretty expensive these days, but we definitely did look at a few .ai's and even some hand registration options. And, we'd winnow the list down to a top 5 or 10, and then we'd hate all of them and we'd start all over again. And then we'd winnow it down to the top 3 and we'd hate all of them and start all over. It took us a solid 6-7 weeks to get there, to finally get to LaunchBay. It's a name we're super, super happy with. We were able to get the .com, the .ai, and the .io all for, I think, 30-ish or so, $30,000 or so. And it really encapsulates what we're doing and where we want to go. But the process of getting there was just exhausting.
Yeah. And I assume you ran this through a lawyer at some point too.
Oh, yes.
So let's not end up.
we definitely ran it through a lawyer. But I mean, there are some names that we really loved. It didn't end up making it through to the finalists. But for example, a name like Porch.io, really liked the name. But there's just so many trademark issues. And so it's when you're looking at names like that, it's not really a name for a new business to land on, in my opinion. It's more of a, as an investor, you need to be thinking about that as an upgrade path. It's what businesses out there would really want to upgrade to this single word. as opposed to a new business coming in and trying to carve out a space on a name like this. I just don't think that's the right path for a new business based off of my own experiences here.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like instead of just coming up with a bunch of domains, instead you started typing keywords in the Atom and brand bucket to see what's readily available. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We did that. And then we also, I think Atom has, they had the single word filter that you could throw on, which was really effective. And then there were different filters that you could put on there that made it really easy to see, like, all right, we want to see what's a name that's in the $20,000 to $50,000 range. Let's filter by that and filter by this kind of feeling or this kind of a name for a tech kind of business, and just work through those filters that way. That allowed us to really pull out a ton of names, some higher quality than others, some more relevant than others. And to be honest, though, I have no idea how we eventually found launch.
Yeah, you don't know what keyword you put in or anything like that.
I think I probably, to be honest, it was probably we were looking at launch because that's a common thing that our users do. And I was listening to, we're a team of 9 now. And so listening to how the team in an all hands was describing what our customers do and what our users do. And a common word that was being mentioned was the word launch. And so what I likely ended up doing was typing in launch into Atom, brand bucket, and GoDaddy and pulling a bunch of names that had the word launch in them, and maybe looked at launch.io or something like that. And eventually found launchbay.com.
And, I think that's one of the things about Atom is they say that, some people search by keyword, but a lot of times what they end up buying isn't the keyword, right? It just evokes something else, like a synonym or something like that. I just put launch into Atom, and launchcircuit.com is up there. Let's see, launchpad.gg, which obviously wouldn't word, boostlaunch.com. But then it's also pulling up ones that don't have the word launch in it, like ignitionx.com, jetignite.com, thrustrocket, GoIgnition, that sort of thing, which I think is getting to your type of situation here that makes a lot of sense. And that you weren't demanding that your business have the word launch in it. It just kind of ended up that way.
Yeah. I tried using their AI generator tool as well, but that didn't work too well for me. I forget exactly how that functions, but it didn't pull up the cut. It was basically just regurgitating all the names I had already seen. And at some point, I probably had seen every single name in their database that was $20,000 to $70,000 or so. But yeah, from a buyer's perspective, the keyword is valuable, but it's more again, the feeling. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to evoke from the name, and build from there?
So I'm curious, you announced this change recently. What has the feedback been from your customer base? Are your employees behind it? How are you feeling about the name?
We feel awesome about the name. We're super excited to, one, have still a relatively short descriptive name that really exemplifies what we do. 2, to own the .com, the .ai, and the .io, and not have to worry about that. We bought all 3. When we finally decided on the name, we bought all.
Were the others hand registrations, or were they?
No, they were all registered and for sale. I think the .io was about, the .com was 15, the .io I think was about 10, and the .ai was maybe 3 to 5. And so we bought all of those simultaneously. So in case it was the same registrant, he couldn't jack up the price or something. Yeah. And no, the team's super behind it. Our customers love it. It really resonates with them. There's some people that are like, why didn't you give us a heads up on the rebrand earlier? It's we couldn't. But we have somewhere in the range of 600 to 700 customers right now. So there's a lot of work to do to get it prepared and get it launched effectively. But it's behind us now. It's a fairly recent thing, and hopefully keeping our eye on our Google traffic to make sure.
Yeah. So walk me through that, right? Because that's something that I think a lot of companies are scared about when they look at doing a rebrand is, changing domain names. So talk to me about your process there.
Yeah, we pulled a full map of our website, every single URL that was there. Our website's in Webflow, and so it made that whole process very straightforward. I used to always use WordPress. My last company was a WordPress company, but it made the transition from the name super straightforward from a 301 perspective. And then, our knowledge base is hosted on a company called Help Scout. So we had to get a list of all that and write a 301 rule in Cloudflare. that was all pretty straightforward. We have keyword tracking that we're tracking to see how things shake out. You submit a name change report through Google Search Console. But then, on the tech side, our devs had fun remapping everything because people use certain URLs in if you're a customer on a certain plan, your portal with us was like domain name wire.motionportals.com, for example.
Yeah.
And so we had to remap all of that, make sure everything still functioned. But, our dev team's really solid. So that all went pretty smoothly. It was a pretty smooth process. It's just a lot of preparation and planning. And then, we were up all night working on it, ordered dinner in for the team, had a nice bottle of scotch to celebrate.
Yeah. So if I'm looking here, so I'm just so are all the Google URLs updated now to LaunchBay?
Right now, if I do like a site motion.io search, they're still there, but anything you click on redirects. And so it's not fully migrated over from Google's perspective yet. Like they're still indexing motion.io, but all of them redirect to LaunchBay right now. And so it's really just a matter of time for it to shake out in the search results.
Yeah. And recording this here on December 17th, if I search for LaunchBay in Google, it's not at the top right now. The idea is once that finishes moving over, then that will work. But so it is a process, right? And it's a risk, I guess, is my point. Even though it sounds like you guys have a great plan here, there's likely to be at least a short-term dip in traffic. You've got people are looking for the new name. They aren't going to find it. Granted, if they just looked for Motion, they weren't going to find it either. They would have to put motion.io just because of all the competition in that space. But it's a challenge, right, to make that move.
It takes time. And thankfully, like you said, we're recording this in mid-December. So we are pretty intentional about when we wanted to make that shift, which was right around the Thanksgiving to Christmas timeline. Give things time to shake out. Organic traffic is certainly an important role for us, but as is, paid search and paid social as well. So
I assume you're forwarding email addresses now? This brings up something you mentioned. You still have this asset, motion.io, even though you aren't branding at it. And, maybe you'll sell it. Maybe the other company will want to buy it. But there's at least a period of time where you're going to want to have both, for a transition. And then even when you sell it, you might want the emails to still resolve or something like that, right? I mean, what sort of requirements, if you do end up selling this name, whether it's to that Motion or another Motion, because there are a lot out there, what kind of requirements would you want to put in place?
Yeah, I mean, we've been discussing selling it with parties. For right now, our plan is to hold it for about a year, let everything shake out. At that point, emails should only be going to the right places at that point. And then we'll likely put it on the market and recoup some of those costs and extend our runway a bit more here. So
right. And LaunchBay, you mentioned that you looked at some .ai names while you were looking at this. Do you consider LaunchBay an AI company?
No. And so we certainly have AI functionality, right? But I was pretty hesitant to move on a .ai as our primary name. There was one name we really liked. That was the only available extension was .ai. But then we did some more digging and saw that there were some additional risks with it that we didn't want to take on.
With the brand.
With the brand, yeah. The name was Starboard.ai. We really love that name. But then we found out that there's other companies with that name that we didn't want to risk being associated with.
Got it. And so, looking at that, you've got one that's purely, both these names are generic, if you will, but one evokes this launching, right? Which is what you do. Whereas the other one, I don't think of launch when you.
Right. You think of movement.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's interesting because I think there's some debate within the domain investing community around should companies have, even if they're an AI or they use AI, should they brand as .ai? Because, in a few years, all companies will be using AI in some way, shape, or form. And so, that could also kind of stick you it could be kind of awkward in a few years if you're not like a pure play AI company.
We talk about this a lot internally here. I have my perspective as a business owner and a domain investor. I have a portfolio of like 500-600 names. Some are .ais. My personal belief is yes, every company that's in technology is an AI company. Like regardless, you're building AI functionality, but are you AI first or are you an AI infrastructure company? If you're not an AI infra company, like AI first, there's no reason to be on a .ai name, in my opinion. But from a new business perspective, a company getting formed, just getting started, they raise their seed round, they can register at .io, .aa, .com. It doesn't matter. .co is also being used plenty. It's a matter of just like claiming a stake. And for a lot of startups, the name is just a name. You're getting the name out there. That's probably the least important thing when you're just getting started. At least you're not thinking about it long term. It's like, hey, let's plant our flag. We got this domain name. Let's go build the tech. Let's go find the customers.
Well, yeah. I mean, you rebranded your last business as well, right? I mean, that started out as what, SEO Sherpas, and then that name kind of pigeonholed you because SEO, and you kind of changed the company, changed to what it was a site builder.
Brighter Vision.
Yeah, Brighter Vision, and what became a site builder for therapists. Am I recalling correctly?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
SEO Sherpas doesn't exactly work for that purpose, right? So you changed it to...
Not at all.
I mean, thinking about that, it sounds like you're suggesting to startup founders that, they don't need to necessarily go blow their entire fundraise on a good name. There is the opportunity to change, but obviously changing isn't fun.
It's expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. No. So what advice would you have to founders that are choosing a name then, beyond not spending everything on that name, as far as based on your experience here, having rebranded a couple of times, what would you recommend?
It really depends on where you are at your stage and at your journey. If you have true clarity on who you are and what you're building, buy the best name you can within reason for what your budget is. A lot of these AI companies or AI companies, they're raising insane amounts of capital at insane valuations. So budget really doesn't matter. But, if you're building something that's not AI infrastructure, buy the best name you can at the best budget you have, at the right budget that you have. And also make sure it's defensible. The trademark searching is super critical in making sure that you're building on a name that you're going to be able to defend long term and that you're able to build brand equity in. And that's really the biggest takeaway I had from this is we consider names like Use X. I think Presto was one that we were considering, usepresto.com.
Kind of like what Use Motion is doing. Yeah.
Precisely. But it's after we thought about it more, we really like the name Presto. But the problem with it is that there's so many companies out there with that. You'll be way better suited if you're a founder to find a name that you can build true equity in and that you can own, that you won't be confused for something else. There are a few other LaunchBays, but nothing that is what we are doing. And we're able to own that entire space. And that is far more important, spending 5-6 figures on a name. It's finding a name that resonates and that you can own that space around and build a defensible moat that will take you much further than you might otherwise be able to get.
Did you talk to a trademark attorney before you started Motion?
No.
Fair enough, right? Actually, speaking of Adam, they launched trademark.io and now they're in a trademark fight with someone about that, even though it's seemingly purely generic, So yes. Talk to a trademark attorney, it's not a whole lot. Before I launched one of my sites, I reached out to John Berryhill, who's a great attorney in the industry. And I'd mentioned one name to him and he's like, nah. He's like, don't touch it. It's this is going to be a pain in your butt because there are a couple companies, that might not have a filed trademark, but, they're coming up number one in Google. And it's just not worth the pain and suffering.
It's not. No, it's really not. And yeah, attorneys, their job is to,
say no
to everything, right? And so you got to be able to filter through that a little bit. But I was very happy that our attorneys did not say no to LaunchBay. There were a lot of other names like, I'd yellow flag that one. That one's a red flag. Even weird stuff one name we liked was Otterboard. And my attorney's like, no, that's Otter is used in so many different things. You could be okay with it, but you don't want to risk that right now. And it's all right, That one's gone.
Well, Perry, thanks so much for coming on the show today. You know, you seem to be coming on after doing some rebrands. Well, I guess the first one was prior rebranded, and that ended up being a success story. You sold that business to a public company, or no, one that went public shortly thereafter, right? It sounds like you're having a lot of success here.
I'm a glutton for punishment, starting new companies and
changing names,
getting them off the ground, changing names. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if anyone listening, I'd say an agency, a law firm, or what was the other group that you said is pretty common? Like
if you do any kind of like B2B software implementation.
Yeah, got it. Check out launchbay.com, or you could go to launchbay.ai or IO if you really want to, because they own those as well. But Perry, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
My guest this week has been Perry Rosenbloom. He is the founder of what is now LaunchBay. That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.